presenting the bill. The bill is to repeal all the historical discriminatory provision in our legislation. Not many people realize that over 100 years ago, many private acts actually contain a lot of provision that discriminate against Chinese Canadian and other ethnic community, including the Japanese Canadian as well. They were not allowed to be employed by any private company. And I'm glad that together with the Ministry of Justice Legal Counsel, our staff have reviewed all the almost 2,000 pieces of legislation dating back from the day 1871 all the way to 1982. And we find that 19 obscure private acts still contain those discriminatory provisions that will really represent a dark chapter in the history of British Columbia. So today I'm really very touched that at long last, our government has done the right thing, that we are going to repeal all discriminatory provision from the legislation.
Ministry of Justice staff, my staff, reviewed nearly 2,000 pieces of legislation. We need to recognize that concepts like human rights and equality, so core to our values and commonplace today, were not yet part of the popular discourse when these discriminatory laws were enacted.
It was last year on July 7th, Honorable Minister Naomi Yamamoto announced the Japanese Canadian Historical Sites Recognition Program. The program is the first milestone in building stronger community partnerships. We are very fortunate to have strong support from our Minister Watt, Heritage BC, Ministry of Forest, Lands, and Natural Resource Operations, the Japanese Canadian Historic Places Recognition Program Advisory Committee, and the Japanese Canadian community members made tireless effort to preserve its history and legacy since then. This program is important to the preservation of Japanese Canadian cultural history.
Thank you for joining us today to recognize Ashcroft Cemetery, Ashcroft's Chinese Canadian pioneers who helped shape this beautiful, vibrant, and diverse community into what it is today. Before we begin, in keeping with traditional Chinese customs, there will be a cultural offering of incense.
Choi Kuko, Sam Kuko.
Get back. Yeah, thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Okay.
I am very proud to be part of a community that honors and respects the history of the Chinese people who chose to settle in Ashcroft and who worked so hard on the railway and in agriculture.
Just now when I saw the train coming, and right away my thoughts went back to more than 100 years ago when the Chinese Canadian pioneers, they come here to try to find a living, to make money so that they can send money back to their families and cousins back home. And do you know that without those Chinese Canadians who came here in the late 1800s, you couldn't see the train coming through and transporting all the goods to Greater Vancouver and to this part of the province. That's one of the conditions for British Columbia to be part of a Canadian Federation. And because They wanted to contribute to Canada, to British Columbia. They are the ones that built this railway. And many of them died here during the process of building a railway. And then they could not find a place to be buried. And that's why a few of them were buried in this deserted hilltop.
A big special thank you to all the community members, the local businesses, the many Rotarians and the many Lions that have given their time, money, and effort over the past 15 years to make this Chinese cemetery the glorious Ashcroft landmark it is today. It's been a full community commitment and a labor of love. The best part of this is I'm going to take a few minutes to single out two very special people. I'd ask that Daniel Collette and Marina Papayas join me up front. Marina has driven this artistic vision with all the pieces that you see here today and many more around our community. She's led a wonderful team of artists that have done some truly amazing work and have made a huge contribution to our community and to the cemetery. For this achievement and so much more, we'd like to thank you. And as a thank you for this excellent contribution, I'd like to present you both with a very special Rotary Award. This award is named for and in honor of the very first Rotarian, Paul Harris. Please accept this Paul Harris Fellow Award and signature pin as a token of our thanks and expression of our gratitude. Thank you and congratulations.
Over the last 15 years, the Ashcroft Cache Creek Rotary Club and the Ashcrofton District Lions Club have worked in partnership to clean up and restore our Chinese cemetery. After several years and many work bees picking weeds and spreading gravel, we were left with a recognizable cemetery.
When I moved here 28 years ago, like a lot of the other speakers, this was unrecognizable as a cemetery. Thank you to the Lions and the Rotary Clubs for having a vision and believing that we needed to clean it up and show the respect that it deserved to those buried here. Now this plaque completes the recognition and the respect that is so necessary. Thank you all to those involved and to the government for this significant recognition of this part of our history.
Our grandfather, the people who buried in this cemetery, who give their life to this community and this province and this country in the past. Thanks to those who have organized this event together, to those who have put their time and effort to this cemetery in the past 10 years.
I was told that I am the longest serving judge in the history of British Columbia. British Columbia entered Confederation in 1870 on the condition the Transcontinental Railway would be built to British Columbia. And in order to complete it through the rough section, they needed a lot of laborers. So they brought in thousands of Chinese laborers, all from the province of Guangdong. They were all Cantonese speaking. As you know, the numbers were over 17,000 between 1881 to 1884. The railway was completed finally in 1885, and the terminus was at Port Moody. The terminus was then extended to Vancouver a little later. Legislation was then brought in around 1875 to the Voting Act, which stipulated, and I'll quote it to you because I looked at it, it said, no Chinaman, Japanese, Indian, or Hindu, whether or not a British subject, shall be registered on the Registry of Voters. Self-regulating professions such as medicine, law, accountancy, pharmacy, and a number of them were self-regulating professions that required the right to vote. And if you were not allowed to vote, then you couldn't enter those professions. And the federal government, basically, with respect to federal elections, mirrored what was your provincial eligibility. Whether you were born in Canada or not, you were not regarded as Canadian citizens. You were given a separate identification card with your photograph that indicated you were a permanent resident, but definitely not a citizen. Then World War II came along, and then, of course, there was, they needed men to serve in the armed forces, and people like Tommy Wong, who's with us tonight, was one of them, who actually enlisted to join. And basically, their stance was, they were born in Canada, they weren't allowed to vote, they were segregated, occupations were precluded to them, and they felt that if they went enlisted and fought for Canada, and in other words, if they went and fought for king and country, when they returned, they would be in a strong position to demand the right to vote.
The railway section between Yale and Kamloops was the most expensive and difficult section of the CPR to build in the entire country. Unmarked plot of land was given in trust to Quan Lung, a member of the Chinese Canadian community, and hundreds of Chinese railway workers were buried here. Chinese people could not transport the bones of the dead back to China. So the cemetery became a permanent burial site, not a short-term resting place. Associations like the Kuomintang and the Chi Kung Tong maintained it. The Chinese Freemasons were well established in Kamloops and also helped support the cemetery.
Grandmaster Fred Kwok. And so we're going to have him starting the official offering of the incense first.
ผู้是良知，照天命，感樂慈愛，濟英力，福如東海，年年在，壽比南山，天賜來。插上去，睇點點做，睇點都做，點唔做冇辦法㗎啦。誠心合掌，柱明香，結義聯盟萬載長。 香煙透達天平上，結興來鑑萬運香。喺後邊幫佢插定中間，插定中間。英靈把酒奠地奠落地塵埃，敬天敬地敬鬼神。今日的台前敬亡兄，又敬前傳後教兄。 还有拿大肉，唔好起得住。
俾香佢哋，一人一支香，一人派支香。
Okay, we got one bao, 2 bao,
没用胶的
3 bao. Okay, thank you.
没有。
Second bow, third bow. Thank you, thank you.
OK，叫我邊個獎賞香嘅？
I'm so happy to be here.
And Tommy, we are so happy to have you here. We thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Your service to our country.
Thank you.
To witness a historic apology to Chinese Canadians for various decisions of past provincial governments. Since that time, we've made a tremendous amount of headway on our commitment to British Columbians to create a Chinese legacy for everyone, for all British Columbians to enjoy.
So the local Chinese Cultural Association and the Kamloops Chinese Freemason have done a wonderful job of maintaining this place of peace and tranquility. Not only is this place culturally significant, as the last remnant of Kamloops' once bustling Chinatown, is also historically important. So much so that in January 2016, this cemetery was chosen as one of the 21 places of historical significance to British Columbia's Chinese Canadian community. This Kamloops Chinese Heritage Cemetery is a special place and a fitting site for this event to mark the contributions of the sacrifices of Chinese Canadians. This commemorative monument, like so many others being announced across the province, represent a sad time for British Columbia and for Kamloops. A time when Chinese Canadians struggle to maintain their dignity in the face of racist government policies and regulations. However, this monument also signifies the important role BC's Chinese community has played in shaping British Columbia into what it is today.
Certainly, it was great in 2014 to see the province recognize the past wrongs of former governments and make sure that something like that never does happen again. And a day like today and making sure that that gets added to the history, I think just strengthens that and makes sure that when people come here to reflect, when people come here to look back on the past, they get the full picture of what really did happen, and can make sure that it really is a place of honor and remembrance for people within the Chinese community that have served not just Kamloops so well over the years, but obviously British Columbia and the rest of the country.
My dad and uncle first came to Canada in 1937. My mom and I came to Canada in 1954. My dad and uncle ran the Linon Farm at the Musqueam Reserve. The area now is recognized as a Chinese market garden. My dad's house is still standing there. My brother, sister, and I are the living proof of working and living relationship between the Chinese Canadians and the First Nation people. Our First Nation Chinese cousin is the Grant family. The Musqueam Reserve shelter our family from the discrimination of the general population and the racist policies of the government. Life was tough and harsh. I was wakened many times at night and hear someone crying. It was my dad crying to my mom, and that he was not making enough money, and that he needed a loan to survive, and also sent money to his mother in China. The life and racist policies in Kamloops and in Vancouver were the same. Jobs, opportunities, and rights were restricted and discriminated. The Chinese came to the interior to look for gold, work in the railway, and later on they came to look for other types of work. The people that are buried in this cemetery are over 90% from the Guangdong province, China. The father of the First Nation Chinese, Kamloops, First Nation Chinese, Gordon Chow, who ran for mayor in Kamloops, is buried in one of these unknown graves. Today, I would like to thank the BC government for this monument here It will honor the Chinese Canadian buried in the cemetery and many others, and their descendants who live and work and went to school in the Kamloops area. The monument will remind the people that the Chinese Canadians are an important part of the multicultural fabric of the province. We accept the BC government's apologies and welcome the legacy to bring education and awareness.
Though I only been in Kamloops for 40 years, after tracing back the history of the Chinese burials here since the 1880s, realizing their hardship and sufferings and the separations from their families, our two Chinese community groups are trying our best to restore this old cemetery as a historical heritage site to remember them. Since 80% of the burials were members of the Chinese Freemasons, and I, being a member of the Chinese Freemasons for over 30 years, and I will carry on the meaningful project, and may they rest in peace.
In 1900, my grandfather Tom Ma immigrated from China to Kamloops. Because he had the long pigtail, often the children would pull his pigtail from behind and shout insults at him. In the wintertime, the children would even throw snowball with the rocks inside at him. My grandfather said life was tough because he had limited English. He would only find odd jobs working on the farms, in a restaurant, and doing the laundries. When he entered Canada, he paid a $50 head tax. By the time my father Danny came to Canada in 1921, the head tax had increased to $500. It was quite hard for my grandfather to pay an extra $500 just so his 12-year-old son could come to Canada. During the Depression, my grandfather had a coffee shop on Victoria Street. He was a one-man operation. He was a manager, a waiter, and chief cook, bottle washer. He was a dishwasher too. So, okay, time was so bad that he only had few dollars of business a day. One day, he had a pot of stew at the back of the kitchen. While he was serving a customer at the front, someone stole the pot of stew through the kitchen back door. And he said he didn't mind. The food was gone. But at that time, people were hungry and they had no money. But he wished that the thief could at least return the pot. I'm glad that the BC government is here to recognize the historical wrong of the past, and we accept their apologies. This is important. We also need the legacy to remember the Chinese pioneer who helped build Canada. I hope that improving this site, we draw the public attention. This will help people appreciate the diversity we have in this country. My ancestors would sleep a whole lot better if they have a nicer place to rest. No doubt in my mind, they would smile, knowing that their sacrifice was not wasted. Thank you.
It's really exciting. It's our first time here, so it's great that in March we could have the opportunity to discover Barkerville. It's something we have always been looking forward to.
How do you like the snow, Tommy?
Not too much. I didn't bring my snowshoes. 一柱明香喜暢運，護國上香大明君，外國台前分左右，堂前驅士勝紅人。勝紅人。二柱明香上香路，誓斬胡人兩不顧，洪家重整金蘭路，大明天子復皇都。復皇都。手執青年碧玉杯，丈夫平地一聲雷，但得魚門三級浪，洪家他日獨佔灰。
好啦，我哋用喺邊個？
喺前面點啊？第三。邊嚟啦？逐個嚟啦，逐個嚟啦。點咗嗰啲就可以行。好啦，好啦，靚靚啊！
It's an eye-opener to learn about all these things people have done. It's a lot of things that I never realized happened.
Everyone a little bit tighter, please.
Oh, and Ed, please. Ed, please join us. Mary, is Caroline taking a picture? Ed Coleman, please join us for the picture.
We're going to take a picture at the end with you guys.
We
should do the pictures at the end.
Okay, okay.
We're all here now.
Barkerville's Chinese Canadian pioneers who've helped build an inclusive and diverse community into what it is today.
Chinese people and no handle and ne pat tubo bonle guess two shacha doke of cha ne pat tubo onle
It is my great honor to be here today to witness the unveiling ceremony of this historic town of Barkerville. As we all know, 2017 marks 150th anniversary of the founding of Canada. The first Chinese people settled in Canada in 1788. That is much longer than 150 years. They helped build a trading post and encourage trade in sea otter pelts between Guangzhou and Nautica Sound, and built the Canadian Pacific Railway that united the country from the east to the west.
We are honored to host this plaque as a token of appreciation for the contribution and the history you played in with Barkerville. Thank you very much and welcome again.
It's just wonderful to
to be able to recognize the work and that the Chinese people did in the communities of Wells and Barkerville. But the harshness of the winters up here and what the people had to go through and how they had to live and work together to survive. And I think this is a testament of how we all managed to do it and how great British Columbia is because of that. And I'd like to thank you all for coming, and it's wonderful.
And Bill was the son of Wan Gar Wong, born in Kwangtung, China in 1852, and who walked from New Westminster to Stanley in 45 days. In 1880, purchasing the Kwong Lee Key grocery business in Stanley in 1885, and the entire family moved to Barkerville in September 1926 and bought the Lun Wo store and renamed it to Lee Chong Grocery Store. And thank you for Ray for joining us today. He's a direct tie to our history here in Barkerville. Thank you.
In 2014, May 15th, our Premier, Christy Clark, showed tremendous courage of this government in leading the government to make a formal apology in the legislature, rising in the House to make that apology with the unanimous support of every MLA, regardless of political party or whether they're independent. So we witnessed that in BC, the MLAs on behalf of every British Columbian is in agreement that the apology should be made to the Chinese for historical wrongs committed. Most important, further to that apology, is that the spirit of that apology be lived, and that in British Columbia, that we carry out in action the spirit of that apology so that British Columbians will live in their everyday lives and benefit from it. And we have the Freemasons from various places from British Columbia here today.
My family have lived in Canada 5 generations. Our great-grandfather came to Canada in 1904, worked on the railway, and also paid a head tax. That's why today is a special day for me and also for my family, and can be here. The Chinese Freemason started Barkerville, started 1863. And we celebrate our 154 year this year, and also celebrate our Canadian 150 year.
Of course, I thank the Legacy Initiative Advisory Council for all your great input, for all your effort, for all your time, all your expertise in making this happen. Without all of you, this would not have happened. Without my colleagues and the Premier, this would not have happened. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I feel I'm not really belonging to any group, like people in China or many friends in Canada. So to me, finding your own roots here in Canada, you see other people who spoke same language, who's from your race, and they actually came here long time ago, made you feel a little bit more sense of a home here in this country.
Being a third generation descendant of a railroad worker, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here and to represent my mother, May Eng, who is currently 98 years old. My mother, May Singh, was her maiden name, was born in Merritt, British Columbia, where my grandfather, Chen Singh, settled, having worked on the railroad after he came from China as a 14-year-old in the 1880s. He was a tea-boy, which meant he had to go up and down the mountains, uphill, downhill, in order to run to serve tea to the workers. So he had this bamboo pole on his shoulders carrying the urns of tea on either side. After the railroad was built, he was not sent back to China as he thought he would be, and so he settled in Merritt, British Columbia, where he raised a family of 8 children with my grandmother, Kitty Singh.